Hello there, I'm Netta Irampur. So glad you're joining us here. We want to get to a very important topic that affects San Diego and the South Bay. More than 40 million gallons of sewage a day flows into the Pacific Ocean from Mexico into the Tijuana River, the estuary, forcing closures of beaches near the border in Imperial Beach and beyond. So this is a crisis that's making people sick, even if they don't go in the water. We've talked to doctors, government leaders, and people throughout the South Bay to try to figure out how to resolve this. It's been going on for far too long. We are joined now by San Diego County Supervisor Terra Lawson-Remer. A part of your district includes Coronado, the coastline going up north. Thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
And Supervisor, I want to talk about your efforts. I know there's been a lot going on with people trying to change and bring money in, bring funding to fix this. But this crisis we've covered for decades, but it seems to be getting worse. Let's start with that. What's your take on why it's getting worse instead of better?
Well, this is a regional issue. Affects all of us up and down the coastlines. Like you said, I represent Coronado all the way up to Carlsbad. People are in the ocean every day, but even folks that aren't on the beaches use our beaches, use our local estuaries, and it's a regional jewel. And so, not being able to go in the ocean and all the pollution has just been really, I think, hurting so many people, our local economy, our local environment, on our health. So the challenge and the real issue is that in Mexico, there's not a lot of political will to fix this issue. And so when things break, they don't fix it. And we've really had to start fighting hard to try to get Mexico to fix the sewage treatment plant on their side of the border. So a couple years ago, the Punta Banderas treatment plant broke. Right. That's why we declared a state of emergency, so we could rally political will and political pressure on the Mexican government to fix that Punta Bandera treatment plant. And now we've succeeded. They're moving forward. They actually allocated the funds. They're actually now in the process of construction. So we are making a lot of progress. It's just not really visible to folks, but I do feel quite hopeful on some of the progress that we're making.
Okay, and just to clarify for people who are watching this, Punta Bandera is just south of our border, a few miles south, and it is like a waterfall of sewage that was flowing down this mountainside into the ocean, not treated necessarily, but now they're working on actually treating that sewage?
They are rebuilding the plant. Okay. So in December of this past year, they allocated the money to rebuild the plant. And now the construction's underway. Okay. So I am very hopeful and feel pretty confident that in early spring of next year, that plant will be rebuilt, which is huge progress. Right. Because a lot of the sewage is just coming straight from the Punta Bandera treatment plant. There's really two sources of the pollution. That's one. And the other is the pollution that is flowing straight from Tijuana through the Tijuana River Valley and through the estuary. And on that, there's also been a lot of progress made. We've been able to secure about $400 million to fix that sewage treatment plant. Huge credit to our congressional delegation that's really led the fight in Washington to bring that money home. We still have about another 311 to go to fix it fully, but I do think that progress is being made. But my opinion is not enough. You have to take these issues apart. There's the work we have to do to fix these sewage treatment plants so that we can stop the sewage flowing into our beaches and our coastlines. But what I'm really focused on with the Superfund site is what's in the soil, what's in the groundwater. Even if we stop the sewage flows, what kind of toxins might be left behind? Because there's a lot of reasons to think it's not just poop, right? Like there's actually other things and industrial affluents and manufacturing waste that have been flowing through the Tijuana River Valley and into our beaches. And so that's what we're really trying to look at with the Superfund site.
Okay, I know there's been so many efforts, but to get this area tested to be considered a Superfund site, you mentioned, tell us what that is. I know that's a new term throughout this crisis that we're now hearing that you've brought to our attention. Why do you think having that declared a Superfund site would help? What needs to happen for it to even be declared that?
So thank you. It's a great question. So I took a look. I wanted to better understand what other options are available to us that we haven't yet explored. So we took a look at Superfund sites across the United States, Basically, a Superfund designation came out of Love Canal. There was a whole bunch of toxics in the ground, in the water, and there was no way to clean it up. And people were getting extremely sick. We're talking about arsenic, lead, hexavalent chromium, like really bad stuff. And so Congress created something called the Superfund that's available for communities to clean up the really toxic situations that have been left behind. And we looked across the US at all these different Superfund sites, and we realized, hey, you know, we could qualify. It's possible that we are a Superfund site. The Tijuana Canal in New York and Brooklyn has about 1/10 the amount of sewage flowing through it that we do in the Tijuana River Valley. There's another situation where all this industrial waste was flowing from Canada, coming across the border into Seattle, and that was declared a Superfund site. So there's a lot of examples. And so I said, like, let's get the EPA out here and assess. Because if the EPA comes out, takes these soil samples, does all the tests, and deems that this is really as bad as some fear, then we would be able to put our name on the list to move towards Superfund status.
So beyond the bacteria that you would think comes from sewage, like you mentioned, the fecal matter and all of that, the chemicals, there could be more toxic chemicals that have been running through.
Absolutely. It's really important to separate, right? So there's what are we doing in the immediate to help the residents that live really close? And that's, you know, I've been working with my colleagues to try to distribute air purifiers and make sure that people can sleep at night. That sort of stop the bleeding, the immediate. Then there's the intermediate term, the work we have to do to stop the sewage coming, and that's the investments we've been advocating for the Mexican government to make in the Punta Bandera plant, and the work we've been doing to rebuild the sewage treatment plant on our side of the border that's run by the International Boundary Water Commission. That's the sort of intermediate. But then there's another issue that we really haven't looked at, and that's what the Superfund site would be about. It would not be about the sewage and the fecal matter per se. It would be about the industrial waste. It would be about if there's, like I said, hexavalent chromium. That's what it was in, you know, everyone's seen Aaron Brockovich, so that's what was in that movie. Lead, arsenic. And what I want is for the EPA to come out here and test the soil, test the groundwater, and see if we do have a problem. And I'll say, I hope we don't, right? You know, I would love them to come out here and say, you know what? This is just bacteria. This is just fecal matter. Once you get the plants fixed, give us a couple months and the estuary will be back to normal. But there's just been too many cases and too many stories of impacted residents across our entire community that I think we owe it to our community to get the EPA out here and really investigate.
Okay. And right now on your website too, people can go in and explain what they've been dealing with, right? The people that live in the South Bay, you want to hear from them and send that to the EPA? Tell us about the effort.
So, you know, I've come together with a lot of regional leaders. I've invited everyone to join in my effort to get the EPA out here. So the mayor of Imperial Beach, Paloma Aguirre, the mayor of National City, Ron Morrison, the chair of the APCD, Jack Hsu, other electeds have already signed on to our petition to the EPA. So we have a big coalition, but ultimately what's going to make an impact are people's stories, are real people who say, this is what's happening to me and to my family. And we really think if people can share their stories, come onto our website, tell us how this has impacted you, then it'll make our appeal to the EPA that much stronger, and hopefully we'll be able to get them out here.
Now, when you brought this before the Board of Supervisors, they decided many of them wanted to wait about 90 days to look it over, but you went around that. Tell us how you were able to do that and why that was so important for you to do.
Yeah, I think my approach is this is a crisis, and you have to act with urgency to tackle a crisis. And I think too often we get into a mode of we need to study this more or whatnot. And I think in this case, it seems very obvious that we're just asking the EPA to come take soil samples and to come assess whether there are toxins in the soil and in the water. I feel like that needs to happen as quickly as possible. I was hopeful that my board would want to join with me on this endeavor. I think in 90 days, when the study comes back, I feel pretty confident that they will sign on. But we don't need to wait. You know, I think there's enough outcry and enough focus from people across our region that we can just move forward. And that's what I'm committed to doing, is just saying, this is a crisis, we have to act. I think that's just been my approach in general, certainly to the sewage crisis, but to homelessness, to housing, to so many other crises we face, is sometimes people just want to have a study, and I have to say, let's just move and make something happen.
Now, of course, the election coming in less than 3 weeks from now, Kevin Faulconer running against you. How much did this being an election season play a role in you taking this on? Why now? Of course, we've been dealing with this for a long time.
So why now is really credit where credit's due to some of our research partners. So about 6 months ago, I brought a proposal to my colleagues at the board, and we started a study group to support some of our independent researchers in gathering air quality data. So I've been working really closely with our researchers at SDSU and UCSD on the data that they've been gathering about what's going on with sort of the intersection between air quality and water quality. And they're the ones who came to me and said, hey, just so you know, we're getting some data that suggests that there might be these other kinds of toxins in the water that aren't just bacteria. And so my team took a look at it, and we looked and we realized that there had been a few other instances over the last number of years of studies that came back with traces of these toxins. So credit where credit's due to researchers. I was an educator, a university educator before I was an elected official. Spent a good portion of my life doing research and trying to use research to get government to be more effective. So very grateful for our research community, bring this to my attention. And then I said, okay, well, let's get the big guns in here. Let's get the EPA in here.
Okay. I know I've asked a few elected officials, government leaders, about if you had a wish list on how to solve this crisis. We know there's some money coming in to fix the wastewater treatment plant at San Ysidro and Punta Bandera that hopefully will get resolved by hopefully spring next year. But if you could just lay out your wish list, what we need to see this fixed once and for all. I know the population in Tijuana keeps growing too. That's a big factor. What would you like to see? What would you ask for from federal leaders, our state leaders?
I think there's a lot. I love that question because nobody ever lets me sort of outline my whole plan and all the different pieces we're working on. So one thing is that I'm bringing a proposal to my board this coming week to bring a lawsuit against Veolia, which is the company that has been supposed to be responsible for upkeeping and maintaining the sewage treatment plant, and they've totally fallen down on the job. And they really are liable for a lot of the negative impacts in our community. And so I think bringing this lawsuit could force them to act with a lot more urgency. So I'd like to see this lawsuit filed. I'd like to see Veolia get moving. For context, Veolia was the company in Flint, Michigan. So just so we know what we're dealing with. So that's definitely one thing that I think we can do. Second of all is I mentioned that our congressional delegation has done a wonderful job on securing that $400 million, but we still need another $311 to fix the sewage treatment plant on our side of the border, which is why we declared the state of emergency at the county and why we're asking the federal government and the state government to also declare a state of emergency. So hopefully we could unlock that $311 million. So that's a second piece of the puzzle. Certainly getting the EPA out here to see whether the Tijuana River Valley would qualify as a Superfund site. And if so, moving forward to all the decontamination and the restoration that we would need to pursue. That's another piece. And then finally, something that I've really been trying to figure out how to put together in my second term is to really find the resources for Tijuana to fix their sewage treatment system. Because right now, everything we do is always going to be like a Band-Aid, because as long as Tijuana sewage treatment system is just basically it rains and the sewage and the rain all run together and it all then outflows into our oceans, we're just going to be, treating it once it's like treating the symptoms and not the cause. And I do think there's some opportunities. I think that there's some opportunities with the Inter-American Development Bank and the World Bank around financing infrastructure improvements in Tijuana. And I think it's particularly more possible now that Mexico has elected a new president who's a scientist, who cares much more about these environmental justice issues. So I do think we have an opening to look at what else we could do from Washington to get the investments that we need to rebuild the Tijuana infrastructure. So those are all the pieces of the puzzle.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for sharing your insight on all of this. It's great to hear from you. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching us here on CBS 8+.